Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Beyond Autism's first Lunch and Learn for our 2024 to 2025 series. Thank you so much. I can see so many people have joined us today. Please do pop in the chat how many of you guys are watching on the same screen and where you're listening from. That would be really helpful for us to get a bit of an understanding on our reach for today's presentation. My name is Cynthia and I'm an outreach consultant for Beyond Autism, and I'll be taking you through the slides today. Feel free to make notes, voice recordings, whatever it is you feel comfortable with. The slides will be made available at the end. So if you'd rather just wait for the slides at the end, then that's absolutely fine too. In terms of questions, I will go through all the slides. And if you have a question throughout, please just pop it in the chat. And if we've got time at the end, then I can answer a couple. But if not, I will put together a list of questions and I will get back to you before the end of the week. So I hope that's okay. If we've got some new people joining us today for the first time, then it would also be really useful to know how you sort of heard about our Lunch and Learns and where you discovered us from. And if you're a reoccurring viewer, then welcome back. So today we are going to be speaking about before and after a diagnosis, what support is available. Now, this is quite a big topic and we do only have half an hour, so it might feel like some of the information is a little bit bite-sized and sort of condensed and summarised. But again, if you do have any questions and want a little bit more information, then just pop that in the chat. Oh, let's try and get there we go. So we've got some Lunch and Learn objectives for today. So for today's Lunch and Learn, we will be exploring the support that's available out there for individuals, parents, carers and families before and after receiving a diagnosis. We understand that the journey to receiving a diagnosis can be stressful, lengthy, and it often does leave families feeling super anxious and overwhelmed. So if you are a family that is going through that now, then please just believe that you are not alone. And so many families go through this, and hopefully by the end of this presentation, you'll have a little bit more support and a little bit more direction. This session will highlight sort of the resources, services and strategies that families can access, as well as provide professionals with strategies to sort of ease that process for families during every stage. Now, I will be sort of referencing some Beyond Autism resources. Those links will be shared with you at the end of the presentation, but it will also be put in the chat as I'm speaking through them, if you kind of want to have a look at that as well. So for today, what we're going to cover is firstly understanding the challenges faced by individuals and families awaiting diagnosis. We're then going to explore the different types of support that's available there pre-diagnosis. And then we're going to have a quick chat on sort of the post-diagnosis support for individuals and their families. We'll then look at strategies that professionals can use to better support individuals and their families through that diagnostic process. And then we will end with me just sort of touching on some real life examples and success stories just to illustrate the impact of effective support. So these stories will be coming through my experience at Beyond Autism and supporting families at our early years service. To the next slide. Oh, I think I've skipped one. There we go. Okay, so part one is the pre-diagnosis journey. So this is everything that happens before the diagnosis. So I'll be touching on those common experiences for families and sort of common thoughts and feelings that families have experienced and reported to us. I'll then be speaking about the support that's available and quite specifically the emotional and psychological support, then the practical support, and then the strategies for professionals. So the first bit that I'll be touching on is common experiences for families. So this is really focusing on those emotional challenges and anxiety due to a child's developmental delay within the first 2 years of their life has been highly reported, and trying to sort of understand and pick out those differences and trying to figure out what's going on can be quite scary. And we've got sort of a few bullet points down that if you've sort of had a child before, there's a lot of comparisons that can happen, and you sort of often think, well, my first child was sort of talking at this age, but my other child isn't, and that can increase a lot of anxiety. Also, the fear of the unknown if parents around them have not reported or experienced the same concerns. So you drop your child off to nursery and, you're chatting with some parents and you sort of say, oh, well, my child is not doing this or is doing that. And other families say, oh, well, I've actually not experienced that. That can be quite anxiety provoking. So it can sort of increase that anxiety and raise some concerns for families. Like I said, sort of comparing siblings hitting milestones can be quite emotionally taxing. And there can also be that element of uncertainty of what this could mean for the family's future. It's that sort of element of you've got an idea of how we sort of assume our lives would go. And a diagnosis might come with some changes and it might not. But it can, all in all, be quite emotionally challenging for some families. Next slide. There we go. And if we're sort of thinking, you've got a family that have some anxieties around the child or parents, carers, then thinking about the primary care and referrals, if you are worried about your child's development. So if you're listening in now and you've observed some signs and symptoms, but you're not too sure, the best starting point is your GP, paediatrician, or your child's special educational needs coordinator at their school. So just reach out and say, this is what I've observed. What are your thoughts? What do you think the next step should be? It might also be quite handy to just record some things down in a little diary, just to kind of have a bank of things that you've sort of observed. If you want to take videos, so then you've got that evidence there and you can show when you go out for those referrals, just a bit of evidence as to what you're observing and what you think needs to be looked at. Making that diagnosis of autism is a very formal process, and it is normally conducted by an interdisciplinary team. So this team typically includes a speech and language therapist, a paediatrician, a psychologist, psychiatrist. You might see occupational therapy get involved. So it's very much a lot of people using their expertise and getting resources and documents together as part of that referral process. So if you have sort of observed some signs and you've spoken to your GP, reach out to the school, have some conversations with the school if your child is at school age, and just have a chat with everybody in that interdisciplinary team and think about what evidence we can sort of gather from all those key people. There we go. Then thinking about that sort of emotional and psychological support, it's just as important for parents and carers to access counselling or mental health support during the waiting period. Now that sounds a lot easier said than done because of commitments and other things going on, work, etc. What we do have at Beyond Autism, and we'll put a link in this chat, is a services directory. I think there's a screenshot later on in the slide so you can get a bit of a visual on that. And if you go onto the service directory, what you do is you put in your postcode and you put in specific services that you are looking for. So you might put your postcode and then you put in mental health support or counselling or anything like that, and everything that is available in your area will pop up, and typically it will come up in order of distance to your house, so you can just see what's around and what's available there. We've had some families reach out to the Beyond Autism outreach team and have said, I'm looking at the services directory, but I'm finding it quite overwhelming. Is there any way you can help? And what we can do in the outreach team is, for some families that find it quite overwhelming, to sort of figure out, what do I need to do? Where do I need to go? What's the most appropriate service for me? We can do that. So if you send us your postcode, we can have a quick look at what's in the area, and then we can jump on a quick call and just sort of support you in breaking that down and finding out what's best for you. So if you do feel like looking at our services directory, then feel free. And if it is overwhelming, then we will put our outreach email into the chat for you to just drop us an email and we can sort of support further there. Again, sort of peer groups and community-based resources can offer reassurance and reconnecting. I think there's something really empowering with families coming together that are going through the same thing to share ideas, share what each other's going through, because everybody will sort of understand that a little bit better. We, Beyond Autism, has an early years service in Bromley. So if you are in the Bromley area, feel free to look at that on our website, where we offer support for families for early years, so between 2.5 to 5, where families come in and we use behaviour analysis and set targets for the child and set targets for the parents to help sort of teach those skills as part of that early intervention. But we also have the sessions are 2.5 hours, but we also have 45 minutes where we lead parent groups. So it's an opportunity for the parents to come together, they sit, they have some biscuits, a cup of tea, and they chat about their week. We've got different topics that we go over, but sometimes parents just kind of want that little bit of respite. They just want to sit, enjoy their cup of tea, and just have that time for themselves. So we offer that as well for families. And again, the Beyond Autism services directory will come up with all of these types of resources that are available in your area. And then moving on to some practical support that's available pre-diagnosis. There is access to guidance on managing schoolwork, work or daily life challenges due to the weight. If your child is at school age or college, sixth form, whatever it may be, speak to the school and see if there are ways to make reasonable adjustments in the school or at work. Because like we sort of mentioned earlier, it can be quite a daunting process. So just having those conversations and seeing what could be practically done just to ease that process and make it a little bit more manageable. There are also services out there to support with financial advice and early intervention programs that may not require a formal diagnosis. So if you do feel like you sort of need support in those areas, then sort of have a browse at what's out there. But leading on to the next slide is that every local authority has something called a local offer. Which is essentially a list of local provisions that's available to those with special educational needs and disabilities between age 0 and 25. So when first receiving a diagnosis for your child, it's important to seek the appropriate support and advice, seeing what's out there in your area, what is available publicly. Many families, though, do react differently to their child being diagnosed. For some, it can be a really, really scary time. But for others, they sort of find relief in knowing why a child has been finding certain aspects of their lives quite tricky and quite difficult. So I'd really recommend just having a browse at your local authority's local offer to then sort of get those sort of specific services that, again, are available in your area. Okay, so moving on to part 2. So thinking about after that diagnosis, what systems, what support is available. So we'll just be touching upon immediate reactions from families and adjustments. We'll then sort of be looking at the types of support, again, that is available post-diagnosis, and looking at ways to building up that support network and building up that interdisciplinary team. So firstly, touching on those adjustments, emotional responses to receiving a diagnosis can vary between families. Like I said earlier, some families have that sense of relief. Okay, we've got the diagnosis, we know what's happening now, let's make those relevant steps going forward. But for some families, there can be that fear of the unknown, and that sort of, okay, now what? And that sort of pressure of having to, get things done, put things in place. There can also be an element of grief, which is sort of what I was touching on earlier, and just thinking my life might not be how I sort of planned it to be. I need to now think differently. But for some families, there's that sense of empowerment, and so many opportunities come with SEND pupils and SEND learners and kids, and we can, be better advocates. And there's so many things that we can do following that diagnosis. Also, just thinking about how families and individuals may need different kinds of support in that early stages. So if we're thinking of cultural differences, that might play a factor in those emotional responses and into the support that is available out there. So again, the outreach team, you should have the email in the chat, are always available to just have quick phone conversations with parents and families who are finding it a little bit tricky to come to terms with the diagnosis. We do have free training available on the Beyond Autism website, and it's completely free for parents, carers and families, but there is a fee for professionals. But that will take you through just an introduction into autism, an introduction into behaviour analysis. We've also got some training up there for EBSA, so emotionally based school avoidance, and autism in women and girls. So I definitely recommend sort of checking those out if you are sort of new to the process and you just want to gain a little bit more of an understanding of what is out there as well. So looking at those specific types of support that is available post-diagnosis. So again, going back to the emotional support, mental health professionals, including counsellors, psychologists and social workers, can support with coping. So again, going back to that services directory and seeing what's available in your area. Social workers are really good at sort of signposting and having those regular weekly check-ins and calls. If you feel like that's something that you would really benefit from, just sort of saying, look, I need weekly or bi-weekly network meetings just to see what's going on within the team, just for your own sort of understanding and to provide that bit of support of what you can be doing at home. And also just thinking about the importance of peer support groups and online communities where families can share their experiences and strategies. So setting up WhatsApp groups, if you come across parents who are going through the same thing, set up a WhatsApp group where you can just sort of share ideas and things like that. Facebook is a really good place to find parent forums in your area and sort of send groups. That's usually really helpful. Again, our services directory will have those as well if you just want to look in that one place. We then have the sort of education and social care. So if you look at our website, we've got a lot of resources and support with EHCPs, which can be, again, another very daunting experience. So EHCPs will support within the education system and really sort of look in what provision and what support your child needs. So have a look at our resources if you're sort of new to the EHCP progress. It will sort of take you through that process and who you need to sort of be in contact with. And going back to sort of if you're observing sort of differences in your child, and you've taken sort of data and you've taken notes, all these things can contribute towards that EHCP. You can also access local services, care packages, community organisations that can provide assistance with daily life, employment and housing. If you are, again, finding it tough, do reach out to the outreach team and we can have a look for you and sort of signpost and make that process a little bit easier. Really important, building a strong support network. So encouraging, it's really important to encourage families to create a strong network of medical professionals, caregivers, educators and community members. And again, like the other point, this can feel a lot easier said than done. There are, it's a lot having to sort of reach out to all these contacts and making sure that everybody's up to date with information. So my advice for that would be trying to set up something that's a little bit structured where you have the whole interdisciplinary team together and everybody shares what they've been working on and sharing where we're up to. The role of advocacy and how families can become their own advocate or access advocacy organisations is really important. Parents and carers are their child's advocates, so it's really important to sort of just push forward and, if you feel like you're not being heard, raising those concerns, and raising what you think is appropriate, and having a voice, and letting your child have a voice as well in how they want to be supported, and what that care looks like for them. And also just advocating for the community, advocating for autism and all the co-occurring conditions. So these are the resources that I was referring to. So we've got the Autism Services Directory. It is a little bit blurry, but you can see there that you can just sort of type in a keyword in your area and everything will come up. We also do have the Beyond Autism Resource Hub. So we've got the hub for professionals, and we also have the hub for parent and carers. Now, the Resource Hub has loads of downloadable fact sheets, loads of resources, videos, links to previous lunch and learns that we've done, which you can also access on our YouTube. So there might be bits there that, for example, person-centered planning. It might be that you're speaking to your child about what's important to them, what do they value, and what do they want to work towards, and who's important to them. So you just download our person-centered planning worksheet, and you can co-produce that with them and have that document there, which can then be shared with the school or other medical professionals. So then moving on to sort of strategies for professionals. It's really important for professionals to have proactive communication. And by proactive communication, we mean staying in contact regularly with families that are awaiting a diagnosis. There's, it's really scary sort of being left in the dark and not really knowing where you're at within that process. So advice for professionals is, just being on top of that and sharing updates about waiting times and managing those expectations. Because what as professionals, what you don't want to do is tell a parent that this will happen by a certain date, and that doesn't happen, because that can be very disappointing as well. Being able to provide resources early is really important as a professional, so ensuring that families have access to support resources even before a formal diagnosis is confirmed. So you've got, some tools there that families can be working on whilst they're waiting for that diagnosis. So by the time that they've got that, we've then worked on building their confidence and their sort of understanding of certain topics that they might not feel confident in. Always create a collaborative environment. Professionals can work together and provide holistic support that encompasses medical, emotional, and practical needs there as well. So always just sort of bearing that in mind and keeping those thoughts as a professional when you are supporting families. So I think we will have time for a couple of questions. So just to conclude that many families experience emotional and practical challenges whilst awaiting for that diagnosis. So you're not on your own. Please do reach out to your GP, paediatrician, or SENCO with support to start the diagnostic process. Early intervention is important for setting individuals and families up to receiving specialised support. Like I said, Beyond Autism does have an early years service. So if you happen to be in the Bromley area, or you are happy to commute to Bromley in London, then feel free to check out our early years service. And then finally, professionals need to work collaboratively with parents to provide holistic support. So I'm just going to go into the chat and answer a couple of questions. We've got somebody that missed what I said about when getting a diagnosis, what evidence can you gather? So you can take video recordings. So if you're sort of noticing slight differences, or you've got slight concerns about your child, whether that might be eye contact, speech, walking, anything, you can just record videos. If that is helpful for you and kind of collect that bank there. It might be just keeping a little bit of a diary and just adding some notes in your diary of whatever you can do. It might be, you're out in the community and an incident occurs, just writing that down, because that might also help you spot any trends and patterns that might be occurring, and just provide you with a little bit of insight as well about how you can best support your child before that diagnostic process. So yeah, my advice would always be to take data if you can, if it's possible, gather evidence of everything that you're observing, because you are with your child most of the day, so you can sort of just get that bank of information going. And if your child is at school age, then speaking to your school, to the school, and seeing if there's any way that they can gather a bit of data and information as well. I hope that answers your question. We've got another one here. I'll do one more. What can I do about a child with no EHCP and also keeps getting kicked out of school for autistic behaviours? So the first sort of thing that I can say is Beyond Autism does have a fast responder service, and this is for young people, children that are at risk of placement breakdown in schools. And the way that the service works is it's an immediate service. So it all happens very quickly. So you would have a fast responder if the school made a referral. So if you spoke to the school and they made a referral to us, a fast responder would go into the service and do an initial assessment and see what's going on. Because what we would be trying to do here is look at whether we need to, work on an EHCP and apply for that, and also think about what is happening in school. And try and support the school. So essentially we're supporting the teaching staff with those strategies, because if teachers don't have the training to be able to support autistic pupils, particularly if they don't have an EHCP, so they don't have that one-to-one support, then that could be quite tricky if they've got 30 other pupils in the classroom. So we would be going in and doing that initial assessment and then offering delivery. So that is sort of an option, but I would say speak to the SENCO, because they can also help you start that EHCP process if you feel like that is appropriate. Because if that that school placement breaks down, then it then gets trickier to try and get the child back into school. But again, also if you've got a child that is vocal and they're able to explain what's happening in school, letting their voice be heard, and them to sort of express what's hard about school. And there are a lot of things that you can do there. Again, if you have a look at our resource hub, there might be some sort of emotional regulation visuals that you can download for the child to also have a voice in what's going on. But it's really important to figure out what's happening in school. Are there, too many sanctions being put in place? Are they getting kicked out of class and then, excluded for being late and things like that? So there's a lot that you can look at. And a lot of, I mentioned earlier, those reasonable adjustments that can be made by speaking to the SENCO. So definitely set those meetings up and advocate. I say would be sort of the main starting point. But I can see that a lot of other questions have come through. So I will reply to those via email, just because I'm conscious of the time. Yeah, so pop your questions in and I will reply by the end of this week. But thank you. I can see that there are a lot of questions coming in here, which are really important. And if you don't have a question, but you would like, you can see these questions in the chat and you would like to know the answers for those as well, just pop a little message to say, can I have the answers for the questions that have come through? Just to end, we've got some references there. So when the slides are sent to you, feel free to have a look at those references. But other than that, just quickly before you all go, our next Lunch and Learn that is happening next month, so Friday the 25th of October, will be on managing residentials and day trips. So if you're a parent and you've got trips that are always sort of offered and you think school can make accommodations for your child to be able to access these trips, then it's definitely worth handing over a link to our next Lunch and Learn. So we'll be sort of talking about having the opportunity to learn through doing, which is an important part for all learners. The session will look at how those planning school trips can be inclusive for the full range of SEND. So not just making accommodations for one type of child, but seeing where the school can sort of expand and make those adjustments for more pupils. If you have found this webinar useful, then please get in touch today for a free consultation with our outreach team and learn more about the different ways Beyond Autism can support you. So either scan this QR code or just send an email to our outreach inbox, and somebody will reply to you as soon as possible. Thank you so much for listening, and hopefully I will see you again at the next one. Goodbye, everyone.